can we talk about the Insurance Collaboration Index? What is this? Let's get some more info about this. David, do you have some insight?
Sure. The Insurance Collaboration Index is a cross-functional project we're putting together to gain insights about the relationships between insurers and InsurTechs and how they work together. And it's a survey that we're conducting. Our hope is to get as many InsurTechs involved as possible. They will actually be giving their feedback about how they have worked with insurers. So it's a multi-point survey that's going to allow us to find out best practices and then also ultimately to rank the carriers that are the best at collaborating with InsurTechs.
I think it's brilliant. It's something we've seen in other industries, but never in our industry. Like I'd shared with you guys in the automotive space, where every year there's a group that puts out this Plant Moran. They put out this supplier and OEM survey to see, like, of all the major car manufacturers, who's the easiest to work with across a different number of different criteria and overall. And it's really valuable, not just for the suppliers to know who to work with, but also to help the OEMs ended up appreciating a lot, the car makers, to understand, like, well, where do we fall and how do we stack up against our peers? And more importantly, why? So, like, if a supplier prefers working with one of our peers, do we care about that? Is there something we want to do about that? Or are there reasons why we understand why we fell this year and actually we're okay for, whatever the reasons may be. But yeah, having that insight has proven really valuable to the auto industry. Wouldn't it be great if we had that here? Is that sort of the why behind it for insurance as well? What's the thought there?
So that's definitely one of the pieces. I think Plant Moran has really been able to effectively get buy-in on both sides. But at least for me, and definitely Tony can share his perspective as well, there's been a lot of energy that has been invested from InsurTechs in terms of going to market, getting created, and ultimately getting funded. This last half of the year, there's been over $7 billion invested in InsurTechs. And all of that energy goes to really one sole activity, which is creating new products that can get to consumers. And the majority of those are InsurTechs helping insurance carriers to be more successful with their existing products, their underwriting, or their claims. And because of that, we thought it was really important that if all these collaborations are happening between all the major carriers, even the smaller carriers and InsurTechs, and the 3,000 or so InsurTechs are fighting for that, then we should really be sharing what's happening behind the covers, what are the best practices, and for the startups that are looking for which carriers are the easiest to work with, if we had a simple ranking, it will really allow those carriers to get credit for the good work that they're doing and not be dependent on size. And then also for the startups to really focus their energy and efforts, and a lot of times the venture capitalist money, so it doesn't go to waste.
Yeah. Having been on the startup side, we did a lot of that kind of offline, like check with your peers and and even in my advisory work, it's like, well, who should we go to first? Which carriers are easier to work with? Like, these are conversations that are already happening, but they're not structured. There's no consistency to it. You'll get a different answer from two different startups about the same carrier or the same people or same department in the same carrier. So trying to bring some more kind of science to it to understand holistically how do folks stack up and where should we focus our efforts. There's huge value in that. Who's a part of this? How does this all come together?
Yeah, so early on we realized that InsurTech New York alone was not enough to put it together. We needed deep research expertise. We needed people that had sat on the carrier side making those decisions, and people within InsurTech. So Ryan, you were actually one of our early.
I'm playing dumb here, but I know a little bit about it.
Yeah, and beyond that, we're working with a number of organizations that provide either experience from the consulting side. We wanted to keep it independent, so no one from a startup or a carrier is actually on the core committee, but we have Pivot Global involved, we have Conning Research involved, CB Insights, and a few independent consultants like David Bradford, who co-founded Advise, and Irene Yang, who led the efforts at Amazon for their insurance group, and Mark Bardella, who has been an industry veteran in a lot of the carriers and now as an independent consultant can really share his perspective without being biased or biasing the results of the survey.
Yeah, no, that's really critical. Tony, I feel like I'd cut you off before if you were about to jump in, but what are some of your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I mean, I think David shared basically the why and who's involved, which has been really pivotal in the last couple of years. So maybe I can share how we got started and what we ended up doing. So our goal with this kind of initial survey research was to initially just rank, not just what, just our initial objective was to rank the top carriers. And we will probably have multiple iterations of this, but we wanted to keep it somewhat narrow so we can learn from the first experience. So we decided to kind of narrow down and focus on InsurTechs who have basically who work with carriers as customers. So these are more B2B solution software types. And our definition of InsurTechs is pretty broad. So it could be a startup or it can be a mature vendor who's been around for 10, 20 years. Anyone who's actually provided services and products to the carrier group. And we're limiting to carriers at the moment. But again, we have plans to expand it beyond carriers to brokers, as well as potentially startups who are in the digital MGA space. And so we kind of, all of the committee got together and agreed on that. And then we realized that in order to rank the carriers in their collaboration index, we needed to break it down into different components. And so we came up with about a dozen components that would make up the ranking, including decision-making, budgeting, and resource alignments. And we came up with a very simple survey. We asked startups, a few startups that we know to fill it out, just test it out. And now we feel like we got a really solid survey. And really we're ready to ask all the InsurTechs, startups and vendors and mature vendors to fill it out.
Well, how does a startup get involved in this?
Yeah, so there's multiple ways they can fill it out, and I think David can share a little bit more of the process. But there's going to be a survey link that you go in, and you can rate carriers that you worked with in the past, whether a POC or full implementation, and you basically rate them. So that's the process. We're going to have a booth in ITC that you can come to our booth and fill it out, or you can just go to the website and fill it out. But one thing I want to talk about is benefits. Like, why should you even care? And we've sort of talked about this. Brian shared a little bit about Time Mooring, who actually we talked to before we actually started this endeavor, and they've been super helpful in sharing the insights they had in creating the survey, which is now an industry standard. It's been around for 20 years.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get there with the insurance industry too. But the benefits for startups is this is literally probably one of very few ways for an InsurTech vendor to influence your customer. So by rating the carriers you work with, you're influencing them. So if the carriers see that they're highly ranked, you're rewarding them. And if the carriers are not highly ranked, then you're kind of telling them, hey, you can maybe do a better job, right? And we see this in the manufacturing world. There's actually this communication that happens through this survey, and the OEM manufacturers actually want to be a better collaborator because of it.
Yeah.
And so just on that note, like, why should carriers care? Well, carriers should care because if you're a carrier who's doing a great job in collaborating, then you're going to be highly ranked, which is great for you guys. You get more vendors and InsurTechs to work with you, so it's great branding and marketing. You attract a lot of great employees, which is an issue in the insurance industry.
Yeah.
But then if you're not highly ranked, it's also great because you'll get a chance to know and compare yourself to other players in the industry, and you can learn from them and do your best to get up with the ranking. And again, this is happening in manufacturing and other industries. We're just trying to learn from other industries and improve the overall innovation kind of productivity of this industry.
Yeah. And it's, as you said, it's not just a single give us a 1 to 5 star rating.
Yeah.
There's categories, there's reasons that go into driving that score. So you could, maybe you didn't do as well as you'd hoped. You could understand with some nuance what's driving that. So, you can't do everything all at once. So where do you focus your efforts? Having talked to enough carriers that struggle with how to be innovative and move their culture and get the right institutions in place internally, to have that kind of guidance or roadmap from a really wide array of people giving feedback is huge. And of course, you're not going to get that from any of those startups directly because it's scary, right? Like they want to do business with you. They're not going to tell you that you're difficult. So you've no way to hear that otherwise. It's the anonymity of it actually is pretty critical here, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's really critical to know. If you're a InsurTech or vendor submitting the survey, your data is going to be completely anonymous. We're not going to share your data at all. We're actually going to actually ask you contact information, but that's just to verify that you are who you are. It is not like to share that information with anybody. We're not going to sell this data. We're literally going to just share this information for the betterment of the.
Yeah, and there's minimums, like you have to get at least so many surveys completed on you, so you can't tell, like all the things that support anonymity. And that's part of to the team. There's this really rich team behind it. So a lot of these things are things these folks have dealt with in their day-to-day anyway. So there's good consideration around it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. And then if you're a startup and you want to participate, if you're a carrier, and you want to find out the results and the insights from it, where do folks turn? How do they get involved?
Yeah, so there's a few ways that you can get involved. First is on our website, InsurTech NY, we will have a page with more information that you can get started. We're also going to be putting up a website insurance collaboration index, which I'm sure you'll probably have in the show notes, Brian. And then, of course, we're going to be at InsurTech Connect in the Innovation Alley. There will be the InsurTech NY Village, so stop by. We will have representatives that can help work with you on the survey. And if you're there, we'll probably look and seek you out as well. So we'd love to have you participate. And I think one thing I really like to stress is that we give you the ability to rate up to 5 carriers. So really help and rate as many as you have time for, because it's only going to give back to the community more. And don't just rate the ones that you had a good experience for. I mean, ultimately, think about this as a way to give feedback so those that you didn't have the best experience for will hopefully improve, because you're not going to be the only one saying it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Good, bad, or indifferent, feedback is valuable.
This is Tony Liu
and David Gritz from InsurTech NY, and this is the future of insurance.